So we're delighted this afternoon to be joined by Laura Saunders, who's our lead facilitator for the NPQLT. And fortunately, we've got a number of current participants and alumni joining us as well to give us some of their experiences. So without further ado, pass over to you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Welcome, everybody. We're really excited to be working with you today to kind of give you an overview of the NPQLT with Best Practice Network and some insights and perspectives from people who've been there and done that and people who work on the programme as well, delivering the content so that you get a really rounded view of the NPQLT. Just a quick plea before we get into the content. Please do utilise this opportunity to ask any questions that you have. No question is too small, too silly, too significant. So please do put it into the chat box, the Q&A box, and we'll make sure that colleagues on the call are answering them as they go. But as and when there are themes arising, we will take some questions at the end to make sure that you all go away with an answer or with a signpost to the right person to speak to. Okay, so let's dive in. I want to start very briefly by providing a little bit of clarity about the journey and the development that the NPQs have gone through, in case those of you, some of you on the call have knowledge or experience of the prior iteration of NPQs. What's fantastic about the NPQs, particularly now, actually, is that they've become part of a really clear career pathway, which starts with trainee teachers and initial teacher training, goes into the ECF, the Early Careers Framework, and then onto the NPQs with the specialist route NPQs, of which the NPQLT is one, and then the senior leadership, head teacher and executive leader NPQs from there. And actually some of our guests today will be able to talk to that career pathway later, so you'll get a little bit more information about that as we go. And what's particularly important here is that we know what's changed, just so that you understand the difference between this current iteration and the previous one. Initial teacher training in ECF means that early career teachers are supported heavily in the first 2 years of their teaching careers. And the DfE's frameworks for the NPQs follow on from there, and many of the NPQ content areas, which is kind of the topics of coverage that you would go through, are threaded through from the ECF to provide that coherence and consistency. Additionally, the NPQ frameworks are heavily rooted in evidence and collective excellent practice from across the sector and our profession. Jamie, I was going to ask actually if at this point you wouldn't mind posting the DfE's framework for the NPQLT into the Q&A box, just so that everybody listening has access to it. Thank you.
No.
Thank you. Okay, so you may be aware that there's a real growing list of NPQ programmes that are replacing those previous 4 NPQs during the reforms in 2020. And in developing the width of that pathway of development for teachers, the old NPQML for middle leadership, which some of you may have heard of or been on, has been replaced by the NPQLT, which we'll hear about today, the NPQLTD, the NPQLBC and the NPQLL, and they're all signposted on the slide. And that's in order to provide much more choice, opportunity and sense of direction for you as school leaders to become basically better at what we do and how we lead it to make that difference for those young people with which we work. As you can see, the NPQLT is 12 months long. And a few key facts here, just to sort of fact bust, I suppose, in comparison to the previous iteration. There is no longer a project, a school improvement project, as part of the assessment. It is now based on a summative assessment task and your engagement prior to that summative assessment task, which I'll tell you about a little bit more in a moment. There are no longer any leadership behaviours in the DfE frameworks, but Best Practice Network felt very strongly that they were a really key part of our programming and our translation of the framework. So we have a set of behaviours and skills that are embedded throughout the programme, really to enable participants to apply that new knowledge into practice as a leader, as they're learning. There's a greater emphasis on practice-based activity and participant context. So you'll have practice activities, you'll have an in-school performance coach that you'll nominate. And this is all about applying your learning as you go to create impact straight away in your own contexts. Additionally, a difference is the domain or school-specific evidence base that's used to create frameworks, and also the content with which through which you'll learn on the best practice programs. And that's as opposed to the generic evidence base that was previously utilised from other sectors. So it's much more honed and much more specific to the profession within which we work. Okay, so I mentioned that there's no longer a school improvement project in terms of the assessment. It is now a streamlined summative assessment task at the end of the programme. Application of learning in practice, as I mentioned before, is now the focus. And the final assessment follows 12 months of engagement and learning. And then the assessment is through an unseen case study scenario where your responses need to be around 1,500 words. Now, that's much lower expectation in terms of word count, but the requirement for the completion is now a little bit tighter because you fit that SAT, that summative assessment task, into an 8-day window at the end of your 12-month programme. In order to undertake the SAT, the summative assessment task, at the end of the programme, you'll need to have engaged with at least 90% of the programme's elements over the 12 months prior. So that's just a bit of information so you know what you're working towards when you're on programme. The DfE have designed the frameworks for each of the NPQs to support you all to really specialise based on your different interests, your different experiences, potential expertise. So we know that the NPQLT is broadly for those in schools or other educational settings who lead or aspire to lead teaching in a subject, a year group, a key stage, or a phase. That can also be in a department. It could also be school-wide for some people. What's important to know at this stage then is that the DfE framework outlines what needs to be covered in the NPQLT, but lead providers such as Best Practice Network have designed how you'll learn that. And our programmes have been written to be highly inclusive and suit quite diverse experiences and contexts. So I'm going to take you through now just a couple of participant case studies to demonstrate the range of participant contexts, and then we'll see more from some live ex-LT participants in a little while. So this is Shazia. Shazia works as a secondary teacher at a small rural girls' school in the Midlands, and she's been teaching for 2 years after a previous career in the financial sector. She currently has no leadership responsibility in her school, but she really does want to promote as a leader within the next few years. But she's unsure of which direction she might take at this point. But she's really aware that her general knowledge and understanding of teaching and leadership are a focus for her now, following her induction into teaching 2 years ago. So from there, then, she feels that she's going to have more of an idea about what she wants to lead in school once she's completed the LT, and is currently deciding between a route between leading teaching and learning straight after the LT programme, and the possibility of branching off and doing an NPQ LTD, which is in leading teacher development, after she's completed the LT. She knows that the LT programme has a content area around professional development too, so that's going to give her an idea of how to link effective professional development to effective leadership of teaching. So that's Shazia. This is Yousaf. Yousaf is also on the NPQLT programme. He teaches in a large inner city London school, which has had a mixed history of success in terms of teaching and learning. And after about 5 years at the school, his head teacher recognised his passion for high quality, consistent teaching and learning, but also his ability to really galvanise others in terms of leading improvement. So she recommended that he find a leadership programme, and the LT with Best Practice was perfect for the direction he and his school were wanting to take. He's currently the maths lead and hopes to continue to promote through the ranks at his school initially into a phase lead, and then into the wider trust by heading up teaching and learning across several schools. We've also got participants from SEND settings, alternative settings like PRUs and outdoor schools, early years settings, HE, FE, independent, international, you name it. We've got the contexts covered in terms of different settings. My point here really is that our participant body is highly diverse, and they are all at very different points in their teaching and leading careers with completely different school or setting contexts. The programmes are written to enable all participants to thrive, no matter if they're already in a leadership post or aspiring to be in one. So if your passion or your role is for developing pedagogical subject or curriculum approaches within your team, phase, school, trust, the NPQLT is likely the right programme for you. Importantly, you can undertake all 3 specialist NPQs and the leadership NPQs if you like, but not at the same time. That would be too much of a requirement on your workload. Just for your reference, the other specialist NPQs that we're doing webinars on in the next coming weeks are the NPQLTD and the NPQLBC, which I'll just show you a little about in a moment. So in designing the NPQs, the DFE created 10 content areas, which each hold a series of learn that and learn how to statements. And this slide shows you how those content areas fit across those 3 specialist programmes I've just mentioned and how they compare to leadership programmes, just so that you've got sight of those. So in the first table on the left, you can see the specialist programmes. They each cover different content areas that are really relevant to the specialism, but all of them cover teaching, which is also in the ECF, and implementation around change, as well as professional development in some format. And those content areas are highlighted in bold text, just so that you can see where those links are. Again, that's important to that golden thread of that career pathway I mentioned at the beginning. The second table on the right just shows the leadership programmes, just so that you can compare with the leadership group participants, where you would cover all of those 10 content areas. So the LT has 9 content areas, the LTD has 4, and the LBC has 5. Don't be fooled by the fact that LTD and LBC have fewer content areas than LT. It is the same amount of rigour and work involved in all 3. So just because you're looking at the LT, please don't think that you're picking a programme with far more work. It's just a greater breadth of the content areas represented. So crucially then, we have structured at Best Practice all of the programmes, both leadership and specialist routes, to cover all of their content areas, and we've offered flow and cohesion through quite bite-sized activities to take you through those. At every point, participants carry with them a leadership development record, lovingly known as the LDR, and that tracks your progress and ensures that there's relevance for you as individuals throughout the programme. And you'll also work with a nominated in-school performance coach who will support you in applying your learning throughout in the school context, as well as being appointed an online leadership mentor from Best Practice who will support you with your tasks on the learning platform. Underpinning all of these content areas on the slide is a very strong and clear evidence base and resource list in each framework, and we've linked these to highly specific school practice that will be presented to you throughout your programmes to really exemplify what the content areas look like in practice with leaders in the field, and to really bring them alive and give them context, and then to challenge you through various different kinds of activities to apply them with relevance to you in your settings. I mentioned a moment ago flow and cohesion in terms of how the programmes are built, and this group of content areas has guided the way the programmes have been structured and designed. So this slide gives you a little bit around the timeline of the approximate hours your programme will take you to complete over the 12-month period. And all of Best Practice Network's NPQ programmes follow this cyclical approach. You have an induction cycle to get you started. Then you undertake cycles 1, 2 and 3, and each of those cycles follow the same format. You start with a face-to-face event, which Emma will speak to a little bit later. Then you'll undertake some online course study and some practice activities where you go and put things into practice in your setting. Then you'll undertake some formative assessment tasks, again, applying in your school or your setting, but also preparing you for the summative assessment task at the end, and having some in-school performance coaching as you go through to really support you in doing that and embedding that practice for you. And then you'll head to the summative assessment task at the end, through which we offer quite a lot of support and really guide you in how to understand that and how to tackle that. Jamie, I'm just going to pause very briefly. Are there any questions coming up so far that feel relevant to touch on at this point?
So one, perhaps, so just clarifying the difference between leading teaching and leading teacher development.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Charlie. Thank you. And I think it would be really useful for you to come along to the LTD webinar as well, so that you can get a feel of the difference. And what I'll do very, very briefly is take you back to this slide here, because this is the pithy response. NPQLT is for those who lead or aspire to lead teaching, specifically in a subject, year group, etc. NPQLTD is about those who lead or aspire to lead the development of other teachers. So it's very much a focus on teaching for the NPQLT and a focus on developing others to maybe go and lead teaching or other things in that setting. So I hope that's answered that, Charlie, for you. Jamie, anything else coming up at this stage that you want to draw out?
Yeah, and we've had a couple of questions about suitability or how soon you can undertake an NPQ. So clarifying, so the eligibility is 2 years of teaching, right, and whether it's suitable for those that have stepped up into a head of subject role, or just stepped up into a head of subject.
Absolutely, very, very appropriate actually. So you may already be in a leadership role, you may be aspiring to be in a leadership role. What we do have is quite a lot of people on the programme who are senior leaders who've been leading in a senior position for a very long time, but want to specifically specialise because they want to develop their school curriculum or their behaviour policy or their school's culture. Equally, we've got people who have just got out of the first 2 years of their teaching and they're going, I want to lead. I don't know what I want to lead. I know I'm interested in what teaching and learning looks like in my setting. So I want to start with the NPQLT. So I hope that gives you a little bit around that. Thanks, Jamie. Is there anything else that's suitable at this point, or shall I keep going?
I think keep going. There's a couple of specific ones, but we can wrap that round to those. Lovely.
Thank you. That's brilliant. Thanks, Jamie. Okay. So very briefly then, just a few stats for you, just to give us a bit of context about best practice, but also, and possibly more importantly, our values, what we stand for. And many leaders out there will realise that a big part of leadership is leading by your values. And it's really important as a leader or aspiring leader to consider the values or approaches through which the provider operates. And it's big for us. We are here to get the best leaders for all children, no matter where they are in the world, and that is of the utmost importance to us. So the NPQ work supports your professional learning through the programme, and more importantly, ensuring that you're even better leaders at the end of your programme than when you were at the beginning, in order to get the best for our children and for our schools. To do that, we work together, we inspire your learning, we act through integrity, and we strive for excellence in all that we do. And you will always get that as a guarantee from every member of our team. If that chimes with you, then that's going to be something that teaches you something about your values-led leadership. And we're most probably the provider for you, therefore. Okay, so I'm just going to move on very quickly for a little bit more context. Our NPQs are delivered in partnership with teaching school hubs, multi-academy trusts and other school groups across England. Our face-to-face events are facilitated by local school leaders that are familiar with local challenges and contexts, and Emma will hopefully speak to that in a little bit. You can see from the map the approximate geographical spread of the events, the face-to-face events and the hubs that we work with. And whilst we can't 100% guarantee those will be exactly the same for new applicants like yourselves, because things change, we do expect, however, to run those groups in the same places as previous cohorts. There's a growing number of international partners delivering NPQ face-to-face events as well. And the majority of these are delivered remotely. So please do use the contact details near the end of the slide deck if you'd like any more information, particularly about international settings. And Jamie will be able to take questions about that too. Okay, so this is the exciting bit. Now, what I'm going to do is invite several people on the panel to answer a few questions and have a chat, really, to give their perspectives about what the NPQLT has been to them in their contexts. We have 3 wonderful ex-participants who have recently gone through the SAT, passed with flying colours, and want to come and talk to you about their experience of the NPQLT. We've also got Emma Beaton, who is one of our facilitators within one of our partnerships, who can talk to us about her insider knowledge on how she works within the NPQLT with a variety of participants. And we will also speak with Will Rogers, who is the NPQ Director for Best Practice Network. So, actually, Will, could I start with you, please? Could I ask you, as the Director for NPQs, what is your intention for the people on the call today in terms of what they'll get, what they can expect from the NPQLT should they sign up?
Okay, yeah, thanks, Laura. So as an ex-teacher myself, and having gone through middle leadership training and senior leadership training, I am acutely aware of the challenges that teachers face in schools, and how much more it is to go into continue your professional learning and to do all of that on top of your teaching day to day. And so my real drive is about making sure that the participants on our programs feel supported, and they get everything they need to be able to do this professional development in a way that really works for them, and to try and really create that sort of buzz in that experience as well. So they come out and feel the value of that professional development from the very first aspect or cycle that they've gone through, and they really start that learning journey. And I don't want it to be just about the DFE sort of the certificate at the end. It should be about the learning processes all the way through. And that's what we're really trying to focus on here at BPN, is to make sure that the participants themselves feel the value. And that's how we know that we will end up seeing the impact at the other end. As a parent, I've got 3 children in school at the moment, and I know that the way we support the students in the schools is to make their teachers the very best teachers we possibly can. And this is one of the ways that we can do it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Will. So can I go to you, Emma, to pick up on what Will was talking about? You facilitate on our NPQLT, What is it that you see when you facilitate those face-to-face events and work with participants firsthand in terms of the value of that professional development in place already? What's already happening for them when you meet them and work with them?
So hi everybody, my name's Emma, and thanks Laura. I think, there's so much really that I could draw upon, but probably the thing that jumps out the most, I think, is the professional dialogue that you get from undertaking a course like this. So you've seen from Laura that you have 3 face-to-face events, which will be with the same cohort of delegates. So you get to know people really well. You get to understand a little bit about everyone else's settings and your own settings. And it's such that in itself is such a valuable resource. The dialogue that you get, the kind of the opportunity to share, the opportunity to discuss and have the space and time to discuss with colleagues, the research, the evidence-based research, which underpins everything that you will cover throughout the duration of the course, is so valuable. And And I think that's one of the things that when I've looked at feedback from the courses that I've facilitated, that's certainly up there as one of the most valuable aspects of the course. So really good professional dialogue. And ultimately, we're all here for the same reason. And I think we'll just mention this. It's about improving outcomes for our pupils. So if you're here on this webinar, it's because you're interested in what you can do to best support the students in your setting. And ultimately, that is what this is all about. It's about giving you the expertise to know how to really drive forward and give you practical applications for supporting and motivating teachers to improve outcomes for your students.
Thank you so much, Emma. That's really helpful to hear. And I think what I'd like to do is go to Sam, to Alice, to Carol, perhaps in that order, if that works, guys, to talk to you about, okay, so what's your experience on the other side of it, doing the NPQLT, successfully having passed? What learning have you taken through things like, you know, the professional dialogue, the opportunity to share that space and time, your work with your online leadership mentor, your work with your in-school performance coach? What came out for you as particular resonances for your learning? Sam, can we go to you first?
Yeah, thanks. So I'm a year 6 lead in a primary school. I have finished LT. I'm now doing SL, and I'm an in-school coach for the current LTs. Firstly, do you know, the first thing I think that resonated with me with what you're saying there is the reason for doing this course. And actually, I was quite unsure. I always knew that I wanted to lead, but I think year 6 is quite hectic, as is many other year groups. And I think teaching, because it's so busy for us, can sweep us along in the day-to-day that we don't have time to work out ourselves and make decisions. And actually, my leadership team just said, go on, you should just do something for you. At the time, I wasn't really quite sure it was for me, because I was thinking, don't you know, I've got enough to do. And I think that's what a lot of us do think in this profession. Actually, it really, for me, the self-reflection was so important, because it made me reflect on, to be honest, strengths that I had forgotten, and raised my self-esteem in teaching, because we're always craving what's next, what's more, how can we be better? Actually, to realize what we are doing matters, and that we forget good things we can do because we're swept up in the next new thing. And I just think, for me, actually, the opportunity and the being forced to take a moment to think about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and why what I'm doing matters, also really prompted, I think, that professional dialogue. I agree with what Emma said, was immeasurable. The contacts that I've made and the other people to talk about, taking nothing away from the facilitators, because that dialogue and that scaffolding of the day is so essential. But actually having a day to talk to like-minded colleagues, I think equally across primary and secondary sectors, and discuss what it's like to be an educator, was so fantastic. But I also felt so enthused to bring that professional dialogue back to my setting and to start discussing with other people, and several other people then started it, which is what leads to the coach position now. And I think we don't get time, rightfully, to discuss these things and to take a moment, because there is no breath in education. And I really loved that. And actually, that's why I'm doing the SL, because I didn't get to the end and think, oh, thank God. I got to the end and thought, oh, right, what's next? I wanted to sort of keep thinking. And again, that the evidence-based is so refreshing, because we know we do things because they matter, but reading that someone says this is why they matter and this is the science behind it, and other people agree with you. I also found, as a leader, that back to me, because I sometimes struggle a little bit with imposter syndrome and telling people, well, I know this is the right thing to do, but how do I know, and why am I right? Actually, I'm not right. This person is right. And here's the, you know, other people's experience of it. I really found that a huge contribution. And also the backing golden lump of this course is that it is so evidence-based. No one's there piping off information telling you this is what someone believes and no one else will believe it. It is evidence-based, and the evidence-based leaves you open to no doubt and feeds that extra thought. I think that I'm trying to think, what do I wish I knew at the beginning? And the workload thing, we're always juggling workload, and then can I do more? Do I really want to do extra? My year is mental with transition, SATs, residentials. There's stuff all of the time. And I can honestly say that, and I'm not here saying that year 6 is any worse than anything else at all. I'm just letting you know that I certainly don't think I have it easy, as many of us probably don't. But I don't really believe that the course entirely added to my workload. I think that it is in small, manageable steps. I think there are reading pieces. Actually, sometimes when I had writing moderation to do, it was a nice, refreshing procrastination to leave and do a bit of reading instead. I think it's in small checks of, like, 400-word summary and 200. I found actually I sort of enjoyed those because they helped me formulate what I'd read. I think it fed into practice. I think obviously the summative assessment is a bit of a commitment, but what I appreciate about best practice is that you get your deadlines well in advance. So I already know what the next year of my SL looks like and when I'm going to get deadlines and when I'm going to get tasks. And that allows me to manage my expectations at school. I can lead my year group in a way that, I know reports are coming, and I knew I had my summative. So actually I just got my reports done in advance or blocked out that time. It helps you manage that, I think, as well. You also get nice, spacious allowances, except for that summative, which is the block of day. I think getting given like a 3-week block to do a couple of hours of reading and a summary, you can choose when it suits you. Also, I found really flexible support in that one of my face-to-face was on the residential that I was going away for a week. They said, it's absolutely fine. Here's another 10 options. Which one do you want? I think that flexibility just makes it manageable to fit into your career. And there's an understanding that we can't be university students. We're here holding a professional job, and I didn't find the expectations too strenuous personally. And I don't find that my colleagues who I'm coaching at the moment are finding that either. We're managing to do that okay. I think what it also did was it flagged, sometimes if you're in a big school, you're one of many employees, and opportunities were created for me because I'm doing this course. It caused that conversation with the coach. Well, how next are you going to practice this implementation? Well, what can the school do to provide that opportunity for you? And I think showing that you're willing and going out there and starting to do something opens those dialogues, which maybe people don't have time for because we're always chasing school improvement. And how can we make you a part of school improvement? I found that really, really important. But I think just finishing off with something Will said about we don't want it to be just the certificate. In all honesty, it probably started off for me as the certificate. Well, I know I want to lead for more. Let's do something about it. And maybe it'll be hard, but I'll just go for it. I don't think at all that's what's come out of it. And actually, when my results came out, there was oh, okay, I've passed. That's great. But I'll be careful here. I'm not saying I didn't need to pass. I'm just saying that actually I found, regardless of passing or not, what I gained from that was perspective, self-awareness, opportunity, reflection again into myself and into my setting and what I can contribute for them and maybe what's lacking in my school and what opportunities there are for me to contribute. It made me just remember, 12 years into teaching, I've taught and I've loved it and I really love it, but it made me think deep again and enjoy learning and go back to that. And like I say, I'm a bit gluten for punishment. I wasn't quite ready to finish, so I'm doing the next one. And it made me feel that dialogue was healthy. And that's what I gained most.
Sam, thank you. That was such a full and deep insight into kind of from the beginning to the end. I really enjoyed hearing you talk about that. And a few things that I picked up was, you wouldn't believe the number of participants that say similar things to you about the development of confidence, self-awareness, self-reflection, perspective. And I'm sure Alice and Carol will speak to that in a minute, but I hear that so strongly through our formal feedback, through talking to participants. So thank you, that's really helpful. And one other thing I just wanted to pick up on was, you said in teaching, we don't get to take a breath. We really don't. The education sector is full, right? And I really appreciate what you said about how the flexibility of the programme fitted with you, the bite-sized nature of it. And it made me think of a participant that I met last week in a face-to-face event who said, actually, it hasn't increased my workload, it's decreased my workload. And I kind of went, what? Talk to me about this. And he said, well, genuinely, it's made me look at things so differently. I can reprioritize and lead most differently because of self-reflection, that I'm looking at my job, I'm looking at teaching entirely differently. And I thought that was a really kind of resonant point with what you just said. So thank you. Really appreciate it, Sam. And
sorry,
go
I was
ahead.
just thinking what you just said about the reflection thing. I remember at the beginning on the first LDR where, you know, you look at values and skills and rate yourself against them. And I remember sort of thinking, well, this isn't about me. I'm coming here to learn about how to be a leader and how to be an educator. And that's entirely for me done a 360, because now I see that leadership is entirely about me. It's entirely about having self-awareness and understanding how you come across to other people and what you can provide, and knowing your own strengths and weaknesses. And actually, we want this in our children. We want them to know their own targets and their own next steps and be proactive learners. But it is entirely about you, and it's the reflection actually that comes from all of it.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Sam. Just hearing about that 360, brilliant. Emma, you'd raised your hand there. Is there a point that Sam talked about that you'd like to pick up on before we go to Alice and to Carol?
I mean, you probably could see me nodding my head along with a lot of what Sam was saying. But I wanted to pick up on something that you actually mentioned earlier to do with the early career framework. And I believe there may have been some questions on this in the Q&A box as well, you know, as to whether this program is right for somebody that's just finished the 2 years of being an early career teacher. And I would say that this program is perfect for somebody who's just come through that, because it really does build on, it's that golden thread of professional development that we're seeking to, you know, show our new colleagues, but also experienced colleagues, a way forward in the profession, and ways for us to really develop ourselves as professionals. And I'm wondering if there are people on this webinar who maybe recently graduated, if you like, they've finished their ECT years, but there may also be teachers like some of us who've been teaching a long time. And if that is you, you know, what our new teachers are going through in terms of their training, the initial teacher training program is so far removed from what I would have done 20 years ago. And this program, the NPQ suite of programs really do give a whole new insight. It's so different to what if you've not gone through your training in the last 5 years, you need to do this, because it will give you so much that will ultimately make you a better practitioner. But again, I think it's about reading the research and knowing that there is evidence that sits behind everything that you will explore on this course. The case studies are really well put together that will help you to understand how to apply something and look at examples of how that works in an array of different settings. So yeah, I hope that's helpful.
Really helpful. Thank you, Emma. I love that, you know, that things have changed. And the way that these have been set up by the DfE and then written by Best Practice is really asking you all to reflect on who you are and how you work, how you teach, how you lead within your setting. I really appreciate that, Emma. Thank you. Okay, so to Alice and Carol then. Alice, can we come to you first? What are the biggest impacts that you saw whilst you were on programme, but also since you've completed?
Impacts. The things that I think, one of the biggest things is having that time with my in-school performance coach. Like, I really loved that time where I could really sit down, especially because my in-school performance coach, there was a bit of an issue at the beginning, but then it ended up being someone from SLT as well. So I'm talking to the people that, you know, right at the top of the chain. And it was great to have that time with them and to really look at, okay, this is what I've been doing, and to really pull apart what I've been doing and how I could improve it, and how I could really reflect on actually what have I done, because I think we're all really good at going, oh, I could have done that, I could have done that, but having that chance to go, well, actually you did that really well, because you've done that, that's done that, and now the kids are, you know, having much more feedback because you did that session on that. So that was really lovely. I really loved having that time. The face-to-face events, I think they cause a real big impact for me, especially on session 3, when, I mean, it terrified me turning up to session 3. They're like, this time we're literally not going to talk much. And I was like, what? You want us to do all of it now? That terrified me, but that was great. Having that chance to be sat with other teachers in the same area as me, but at different schools, so they kind of understood the kids that I was dealing with, and to kind of go, this is my problem, this is what I'm dealing with, help me. And to kind of have that chance with others to then go, oh, have you tried this, have you tried that, and just kind of get an outside perspective on things, definitely made me think about things differently, and then again come back to school and go, hey, actually now I'm going to tackle it this way, because all those other ideas have kind of given me that chance to do that as well. So I definitely think there has been a lot of impact. It also made me, this sounds so nerdy and I don't mean it to sound like this, but it made me have my love of educational reading. Like, I found this new love that I didn't really know that I had. Like, I just love it. Like, give me some educational research and I'll read it all day. Like, I just find it so fascinating. And yeah, I never realized I'd love that. But it's been great. And I think the assessments, having that choice of what formative assessments you could pick was great, because there is definitely certain, I'm a teaching and learning lead in my faculty, so I have certain areas that really interest me, and to be able to tailor things towards things that, yeah, that could really work for my faculty, so I want to make sure I'm going to home in on that case for that formative assessment, because that's personal to me and I can kind of make use of that. I think it was really good that you could tailor it to where you wanted to go with it, but again, the flexibility of it, you know, it allowed me to have that not stressing too much, because I knew if I had a deadline coming up at school, so I teach a lot of BTEC, there's a lot of marking, and one of our deadlines for the NPQ was literally the same time that I needed to get things sent off to Pearson, and to be able to have that chat with the online mentor, who's also great. My person was amazing. I'd always be messaging her, and I'd be like, oh, can I just send that in 2 weeks late? And she'd be like, yeah, that's fine, no problem. And the dates are there to kind of help you, but they're not set in stone. If you miss it and it gets a late mark next to you, it doesn't do anything to you. It doesn't like mean you can't pass or anything. You just hand something late and things happen. So I think that definitely, you know, had a positive impact on me and on my workload, to make myself not stress that if I can't meet that deadline, it's still okay as well.
Thank you so much, Alice. It's brilliant to hear how the way the program's been designed has really supported you. I'm hearing a lot about flexibility, choice, bite sizing of the elements on it, and the breadth of elements that have impacted on you. So the face-to-face, the in-school performance coach, the FATs, the online leadership mentor, these are all elements built intentionally to be able to support all participants in accessing it in the ways that they need. It is based on the neuroscience, that there's a lot of science behind it. I'm so glad that it's playing out for you like that, and that it's had such an impact. And I would just like to say that on the third face-to-face day, we don't just leave you to fend yourselves. It's a highly structured day, but built to develop confidence and practice, as the way that Alice described. Thank you so much, Alice. That was really insightful. And I got a real buzz from listening to you, actually. That's brilliant. Carol, over to you. What are your kind of key takeaways from the NPQLT? What did it do for you?
Well, quite interestingly, was probably continue to be one of the older participants on the course. And I got myself involved because, and I'm sure lots of teachers feel like this when they're sort of quite a way down their career path, that I felt like I was marking time, and that I wasn't developing my own practice. And I kind of, also being a music teacher, if anybody else is teaching music out there, as we know, the music department is usually at the back end of the school and you don't see anybody for weeks. And between that and kind of where I am, you know, I thought, what can I do to get me excited about teaching again? So this was recommended, and I didn't even think about it. I just went straight in and thought, yeah, crack on. But I can so resonate with everything that Alice and Sam have said, in that the bite-sized chunks are just amazing. The face-to-face events were so relaxed, but to the point where I'm actually, although I'm speaking to you now quite reasonably confidently, I wouldn't be speaking in an event like that in front of people. I'd be the one that would be, you know, sort of quietly rocking in the corner. But I didn't feel like that at all in the face-to-face. I found that I was much more confident. I think the biggest impact on me is not necessarily a thing that I've learned particularly, or I think what for me it's been how I'm organizing myself, it's that self-reflection thing again, I think. How I'm organising myself, how I'm meeting my deadlines, as you say. I mean, again, Alice, I completely get you. We are also BTEC, and ooh, yes, that can be paperwork heavy. But what I did find though was that I did get myself into a bit of a pickle, and got really quite behind. I know that, as Alice said, there is flexibility with deadlines. The key for that though is to keep talking, keep communicating with your online mentor, and to a certain extent your in-school performance coach, but your online mentor is the one that you're submitting work to. So keep communicating with them, and it usually works out fine. I mean, I ended up being, oh, God, goodness me, I must have been about 2.5 months behind in some studies. So I spoke with my online mentor, and she was just amazing. She just calmed me down and said, "Look, it's okay. The work." She said, "I can see the standard of work that you're submitting to me. It's of the highest quality, and just, you know, you need just do me some bullet points on this, this, and this, and then that'll get you back on track, and then you can pick up again at your normal pace." And I'm like, phew, thank goodness for that, because I really did want to complete. So that was really good. That kind of, that not just the educational support or the academic support, but that emotional support as well was really, really good. There was something else that came into my mind there as I was speaking, and it's
well, don't worry, Carol. If you want to think about it, and we can come back to it in a minute when we get to the Q&A, would that work?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fine. I mean, you know,
thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much. And I really hear about what you said about keep talking to your online leadership mentor. It's really important. That relationship that you build is really important. And we've actually put some measures in place now that mean that participants cannot fall behind in quite the same way that you experienced.
Yeah.
But you will continue to get that support. And personally, since joining Best Practice Network, I can hand on heart say it's one of the most supportive organisations I have ever worked with. And so to hear that it's working out for participants in the same way is really nice, very heartening. So thank you, Carol. That was really, really useful to hear. Thank you. Now, I'm very aware of the time. Jamie, have we got some questions that we want to go to, or do you want to talk about a bit about funding first, and then we can come back to our guests in a minute?
I think so, yes. If we finish the presentation, there's a few slides left, and then we'll come to Q&As. So in terms of funding for all of the NPQs at the moment, as I'm sure you're probably aware that there is scholarships in place for all state-funded schools. So that includes local authority schools and multi-academy trusts, as well as independent special schools as well. If you're not entirely sure, then get in touch with us. We can confirm that there's a full scholarship in place or not. And it's worth noting that they will be running until, they're definitely until the end of this academic year. But at the moment, there's no confirmation of what scholarships or what funding will be in place from September 2024. So really all lead providers very much the guidance that, you know, if you're looking to do this, then if you want to guarantee you can get it fully funded, then now is the time if you're at a school in England. On top of that, the Department for Education have also set out targeted support funding to support schools, specifically small schools who've been able to undertake NPQs. Historically, there's been difficulties with time out of school and the costs that enables. So you can see on the right-hand side that state-funded schools can access a £800 grant if they've got 1 to 150 pupils, a £200 grant if they have 150 with more than 150 pupils, and then also smaller secondary schools can also gain a grant as well. So that's in place for the scholarship in place for this academic year, guaranteed. Support funding is in place until 2025, and obviously we'll keep everyone updated as we move forward with that. Go to the next slide, Laura. So it's worth noting, actually, one last thing with funding is that for schools in Wales, Scotland, and international, you'll know that there's a cost to apply for each programme. For the NPQLT, it's I believe it's £1,250 to undertake. But again, get in touch with us directly and we can talk about payment plans and sort of next steps with that. Currently, we are open for applications to our October intake. So that starts in the next academic year. And so ideally, we're trying to support people to apply before the end of the summer term, so that when we come back in September, it's a much smoother transition to that start date, rather than, historically, again, we get lots of late applications and, have a last minute rush. That is always the case. But the earlier you apply, the earlier your place is secured, so you won't miss out. And the sooner we can, get everything enrolled for yourself. If you have any questions at all, there's a sales team, there's a support customer services team that's available over phone, over email, and also through the online chat function on our website. So we can speak to you in whichever best method works for you. And I think we'll go on to Q&A, Laura, with that.
Great, thank you, Jamie. That's really helpful. A couple of questions just came in around scholarships and applications, if you're in a position to take those. So Daniela has asked, how do you apply for the scholarship? And somebody has asked, when do we hear for certain if we have a place? I applied and then got invited to this call, but have not had any confirmation.
So how do you apply for a scholarship? So we will support you with the process. Essentially, step 1 is apply with Best Practice Network. Step 2 is we'll then support you link up your application with the Department for Education, and they'll access funding if you're at a state school, as we discussed. In terms of, there was a question as well I saw about, can you apply for scholarships more than once? And the answer is yes, you can, just not for the same programme. So if you've done the NPQLT and then you want to go on and do the SL afterwards, that will still be funded through scholarships. What you can't do is undertake the same programme again, for whatever reason you might like to. You enjoyed it so much that you've gone back. When do you hear if you have a place? You should hear once your place has been offered and once everything's confirmed. If you're not sure where you're up to, then I would recommend for you to get in touch with us and find out.
Thanks,
Again,
Jamie.
Call, email, or message.
Thanks, Jamie. That's really helpful. If anybody else has any questions, please do get them in the chat box. I've been trying to answer them as Jamie's been speaking, if they've been relevant. There've been a few questions about, I've already done a middle leadership course of some ilk. Some people have talked about the NPQ ML, some people have talked about other ML programs. And the question has been, so what's next for me? Is the LT the right one for me? It's not an easy question to answer, in that it's how long is a piece of string. It kind of depends on your context. Now, to make that a little bit more helpful, if you're looking, somebody had asked, is the SL the next one for me? If you're looking for senior leadership next, and that's what you have discussed with your SLT, then perhaps that's the one for you. If you're looking to specialise and lead teaching and learning in your school, your department, your phase, your subject, and focus very much on curriculum or pedagogy in terms of the approach for your students, then the leading teaching is for you. If you've done the ML, it doesn't stop you doing any of the other specialist programmes, so LT, LTD or LBC. If you have done 2 years of teaching, in theory, you could apply for any of the NPQs. You've got to do that appropriately. You're not going to be starting by applying for the NPQ EL. So we'd look to one of the specialists first. But if you've done a middle leadership programme already, look at the specialist frameworks, see which ones are most appropriate for you. If they're not, look to the SL, see if that's more appropriate for your progression and your golden pathway through our profession. Hopefully that answers that question. Will, is there anything you wanted to add at this point based on the questions that have arisen?
No, I think you're doing an amazing job, Laura, at answering these both verbally, and I can see them popping up in the written answers as well. So nothing more to add on that. I think the one thing that is interesting is this is why these webinars are so important. These questions about what do I do next and so on, which one's right for me, this is why we put on these, so you can hear from people who have completed these courses and who have taken part in this and seen what they get out of it. So please, if you're unsure, you're split between one or the other, then we will be running these webinars over the next few weeks. Maybe attend the other one that you're thinking about and see what you think.
Thanks, Will. That's so helpful. There are a couple of other questions in there. Is there an interview process to get a place? Not an interview per se, but the application process is highly rigorous. So as long as you complete that in what, answer all the questions that are in there, we can have that conversation with you as you move forward. The webinar for the NPQ LBC from memory is Thursday, the 18th of May. So 2 weeks today, James. So I hope that helps you. Rebecca, thank you. That's really kind. We have a question from Rowena about if you move schools during the NPQ, is this a problem? It's obviously context-based. So if you go, in essence, no, it's not a problem. It depends, obviously, assuming you move to another school, that's fine. If you move to a different context entirely, that is a problem, because you won't be able to undertake the programme because it's about application within the school setting. But equally, if it's within any education setting, it might be possible. So again, a little bit, how long is a piece of string, Rowena? But in essence, no, it's not a problem. Niall, can you send me the links for the other webinars, please? Jamie, what are people doing if they want to get onto those programs, onto those webinars?
So the easiest place is all the webinars are advertised on our website, but we can try and, if I can quickly find the links and put those into the chat box.
Thank you, Jamie. I really appreciate that. That's great. Okay, we are at time. I want to thank, with a very warm thankfulness, Sam, Alice, Carol, Emma, Will, Jamie, our wonderful Chris on the help desk who supported the tech side of things. And thank you all very, very much for coming. We hope that we've given you an essence of what the NPQLT is with Best Practice Network. And we look forward to your applications. If you're still trying to decide between the LTD and the LBC as well, please do come along to those webinars. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you very much. Dead on 5 o'clock, we will end now and wish you well for the evening. Thank you, everybody. Take care.